It was an internal dialogue for LD, that chronic inner conversation about an idea. Or actually, it was about ideas. Do ideas need to have form to be real? Is a physical representation the final validation of any thought? It was ironic that he had these thoughts while drawing in his notebook, a tentative design of something his spirit could envision, but his hand had yet to be able to commit to form. But as he watched his hand hold the pencil and slowly let a wing flow onto the paper through his fingers, he pondered the alternative of his thoughts shaped by the concrete forms of things. Was he producer or product, creator or created, thought or object? It was an external dialogue for MCP, the persistent question he asked everyone he met, or everyone whose language he could master soon enough to ask before he moved on, his connections as fleeting sometimes as if his life were not real, while at other times the connections so strong he could not remember his origins. He wanted to know about people, places, histories, customs, beliefs, and all the varieties of life. But most of all, he wanted to know himself, and thought that he was out there, somewhere, among all of the people he could meet. Amuse me. Sire, he said, give me a few moments, and some paper, stiff paper, and a quiet corner. And into the shadows of the court LD retreated. The music of the night rippled out from the dancing of lute and horn, of flute and voice, while he studied the square of the parchment given him. Turning it over in his hands, he contemplated what form might emerge from the blank sheet. Would he find a humorous sketch? A bit of bawd? Or maybe a contrivance of decoration for body or room? Or wait. His hands had begun to fold the paper, now here, now there, into a shape, in the manner of a paper bijou he had once seen in a packet from the Orient. A crane, no wait, a lesser bird, but a bird of flight, not a bird of simple watching and waiting, a bird of actions. If only he could make the wings actually move to flap about, yet, with the right curve of this place and of that place. Are you ready yet? Sire, I am done. Amuse me. Sire, give me your attention, and I shall tell you tales that will speak beyond your wildest imagination. But give me just a moment for me to collect my memories. Out onto the parapet, MCP strolled, the stars above reminding him of nights far away, the sense of an evening hinting at aroma of foreign lands. What tale to tell? How much of it to tell? That night in the desert? Or maybe the many months in the palace? Or the many years of service to another ruler? Or wait. Yes, those words told him by that strange monk. No, not the ones that sounded so religious, but the ones that sounded so ordinary until he returned home and reconsidered what ordinary meant. Are you ready yet? Sire, I am done. This, he said with a flourish, is a bird you need never feed. It will sing you a song, but the song must be in your own head. It will be the song of your imagination set free, given wing, taken flight. It will not leave you feathers, but it will make soft the places of your soul like no down can. From this bird no egg will drop, But from it shall come the sound of your laughter, the smile of your face, the warm feeling in your heart reborn. From behind his back he brought forth the parchment, folded and shaped in the wings and beak, and with a thrust the paper thrush fluttered upward toward the regal ceiling, and then in graceful curves and curls danced among the candles, and then the heads of the court, before skittering to earth at the feet of all, now bent, now rolling, now howling, now pointing, all a-skittered by the flight of the flightless bird. Late one night, when the sky was filled with stars you cannot see here, in a place where the land is hot at night, and the sky is ice blue by day, and water is worth its weight in gold, and everyone is adorned in gold, I was summoned into a tent made of hides of animals whose names you do not know, and whose descriptions you would not believe. I entered into a circle of people whose eyes turned up at their corners, and whose hair was as straight as the hairs of the bows of the viol. It seemed to me like all who were seated were as one, but for me, I felt the stranger. Their language was one I had begun to learn, and I listened intently to understand what they were saying. The person to my side spoke first, and spoke of hopes and dreams and joys and sorrows, of a life poured out like a mixture of wine and vinegar. In turn, each spoke of deaths and births, of buildings and fires, of cold and of heat, of yesterday and tomorrow. As the words passed through the circle, they arrived at last at the simple man to my other side, who looked me in the eye, and in the heart, and in the soul, and invited me to speak before it was his turn, a look I could not refuse. So I told them of my travels and of my home, of my wanderings and my wonderings, of my faith and of my doubt, and my long search for myself. And with a sigh, I turned to my neighbor that he might speak. A silence filled the tent as all seemed to await the words of this one man. At long last he spoke poetic lines worthy of the highest ceremony of our cathedral, of a Savior born, of a Savior alive, of a Savior dead, of a Savior honored. And then he paused, and in a voice so quiet it thundered against the stillness, he said, I have lived, I have learned, I have remembered. And then turning his gaze on each of us in turn, he repeated again and again and again, just like each of you, in a voice beyond stillness in the silence. As he ended his story in the mode of his telling, he looked each of the court in the eye, and then the heart, and then the soul, as he repeated, just like each of you. In the silence beyond stillness, the court lost its voice, until at last a small titter arose from a corner, and then a heartier laughter until a roar filled the room. Just like me, ha ha, sure. Me, ha! When the paper bird had ended its flight, one after another took it up again, and sending it aloft with a toss of the wrist, amused the throng with flight after endless flight, until slowly the parchment, beaten by hands and wind and floor, drooped and sagged back into the sheet of paper it was. When at last it could no longer fly more than a foot or two, it was picked up no more, and slowly a round of applause filled the room as L.D. bowed in appreciation. The laughs, once aimed at the strangeness of his tale, slowly turned their own head, and one by one the court looked side to side and began to howl with shouts of "just like you" as they pointed and caricatured the perceived foibles of one another. But when fingers met fingers, barbs met barbs, and sensitivities met sensitivities, the howls subsided into the gentle chuckle of shared smiles and common quiet words. As if of one mind, they turned to MCP and almost in unison said, "Just like all of us," as MCP folded his hands in the Eastern sign of appreciation. LD clapped their applause to an end. "Now," he said, "you have seen paper become a bird and a flightless bird fly. That was simple. My hands found the shape and shared it with you. But now one more thing I will shape for you with my mind, not my hands. A vision of a time in the future when the paper will become metal as thin as paper, of metal as thin as paper, shaped by hands of machines the size of giants, of shapes so large they will hold you within them, of you in them taking flight not for minutes but for hours, until you can race with the sun and make the sea as if a pond, with no more effort than you took to send my amusing little bird aloft again and again and again." Out of the silence, MCP broke into words. "Now," he said, "you have heard words from lands beyond your knowing and sensed their wisdom. People you do not know, whose lives are foreign to you, remind of you how much alike each of you is to each other. My story from my travels is but one of many with the same message. I have eaten strange meals which would have delighted your palates. I have worn silken robes more beautiful than you could have imagined. I have worshipped in temples whose splendor neither eclipsed nor is eclipsed by our own. There is a day ahead when those people will not be foreign to you, and those foods will be on your plates, and those robes will adorn your bodies, and those gods will hear our glorias. But in that day we will not be foreign to those people, and they will taste the treats of your table, and your robes will clothe their bodies, and our gods will hear their mantras." Slowly, very slowly, the ruler rose from the throne, and in a voice most stern and lifeless proclaimed, "We are not amused. You are a fool. You are filled with foolishness. You are a liar. You are filled with lies. Stick to your tricks. Stick to your stories. But do not take me for the fool. Do not lie to me." It was an internal dialogue for LD, that chronic inner conversation about an idea. Or actually, it was about ideas. Do ideas need to have form to be real, he mused? Is a physical representation the final validation of any thought? It was an external dialogue for MCP, the persistent question he asked everyone he met, or everyone whose language he could master soon enough to ask before he moved on, his connections as fleeting sometimes as if his life were not real, while at other times the connections so strong he could not remember his origins. But both knew a real fool, both knew a real liar when they met one.